Hi and welcome to this module on the overview of Grid 3 software. In this module we will be covering the following learning objectives: grid sets that are available in Grid 3 for text communication. We'll be looking at setting up a user, how you can navigate within Grid 3, the basic user settings. We'll look at how you can back up and restore users, some troubleshooting and looking at software updates, and finally some tips and tricks for Grid 3. Firstly, we'll take a look at some of the text grid sets that are available within Grid 3. We have Fast Talker, Alpha Core and Text Talker as three of the main ones. Within Fast Talker there are two sizes, a large cell and regular size. There are lots of different ways that you can make quick sentences using phrase storage and efficient word prediction. It's available for Grid 3 only in the Windows version. The Alpha Core grid set has a range of different keyboard options. It also has buttons that allow you to access the accessible apps, and you can use it on both Grid 3 for Windows as well as Grid for iPad. Text Talker, similar, you can do some conversation switching as well as fast predictions, and also available on Grid 3 for Windows and Grid for iPad. You'll find lots more information about them and how to compare them by looking on the Smartbox website, looking at their learning resources, the manuals and webinars available there. We're going to take a quick look at them just so you can see what they look like in Grid 3 now. This is the Fast Talker grid set. In here you can see there's lots of different ways to communicate with other people using text. So you could do regular chat, which is just a speech, text-to-speech option where you write your message, and you'll see that it starts to use some word prediction across the top to allow for some more efficient messaging. You can also access some stored messages by going down to the message button here, and you can see there's a range of different topics for phrases. So you've got personal care with short stored phrases around helping and making a phone call, etc. You've got some quick comments. So just some different ways that the person can just access some phrases without having to type the same thing over and over again. They can also type something up the top and then add a phrase into a particular category as well by themselves. So the Fast Talker grid set allows you to do text-to-speech, speaking to other communication partners. You can do access to a web browser, phone, SMS, emailing individuals, and then there's some other computer functions as well. It really depends on the device that it's on, so these features might not be available across all devices. Let's take a look at the Text Talker page set. This is the Text Talker page set. It has word and phrase prediction across the top of the keyboard. You can start to type something.
Hello.
And as you start to type things, it'll start to predict. It's a lot simpler than the Fast Talker grid set, but you can go into settings and access some key features, change your keyboard layout, access some settings to change the volume, etc., or move the cursor around to do some editing in your text window. You do have access to stored phrases by tapping on the top left-hand corner and going into quick phrases that way. And you also can then speak your message using the speech bubble here. So that's just a quick overview of the Text Talker page set. And now we'll have a quick look at Alpha Core. This is Alpha Core. It was developed by a speech pathologist working with lots of people with MND. You can choose your keyboard, or if you've already chosen one, it's easy to go in and change something later. So you've got QWERTY layouts. You've also got some layouts for ABCD, which might be more familiar to some individuals who don't have those computer skills or familiarity with a computer. Frequency scanning for switch scanning users if they it has the most commonly used letters at the top where you scan first. Frequency split, which is a larger keyboard for people with difficulty accessing smaller buttons, can be used well for eye gaze. And a 2-hit keyboard, again, much bigger buttons, takes a little bit longer to create your messages, but great for people who might find it harder to access the smaller cells. So let's go back to QWERTY and just select that one there. This is the text-to-speech option, similar to what we looked at in Fast Talker and Text Talker. And you can start to create your message and you'll see some prediction happening across the top with words and phrases. The other thing that you can do in AlphaCore is go into topics and you have some stored phrases at the top in the light blue section. You can see all the different categories. And then the darker blue buttons are access to some of the computer functions or social media options that you may want to use text communication for as well. So that's AlphaCore in a very small nutshell, but you can explore that more on the Smartbox website or if you get access to Grid 3 yourselves. In addition to all of the text-based grid sets, there are some other grids available in Grid 3, such as the accessible apps, which is things like social media grids, YouTube, Netflix, WhatsApp, etc. Some environmental control grid sets. So if you have a device or an accessory that allows you to transmit signals to something like a TV or an air conditioner, then those environmental control grids allow you to control from your screen. And then there are also some computer control grids, which allows you to go outside of Grid 3 and access the Windows environment and control your device to send emails or open a browser from software on your computer. What I'm going to do now is go in and show you how you can set up a user in Grid 3 and access all of those different grid sets. To set up a user in Grid 3, when you open up the software for the first time, it may pop up with the Getting Started option for creating a user. Otherwise, if it opens to a screen with a user at the top, you can go into the menu and choose Users. And this is the pop-up that you would see. So you would click on New, and this is the starting format for creating a user. We click on Get Started. We enter a name. And here you can choose the language that you want everything to be in. So we've got English Australia. If we click on the drop down, you can see that there's a range of other English options as well as other languages. We can change our picture for the profile and our voice. If I click on change, the available installed voices are Lisa and Tyler, Australian voices. We also have Karen and Lee, Liam and Olivia as child voices that are all of the Australian available voices that we can use for free with Grid 3. You can purchase additional voices or accents in other languages here, but you would need to, if you want the language in the keyboard on your Grid 3, you would need to purchase that as an addition. So we can listen to those. Once we selected one that we're happy with, we can then choose next. This is where we can sign in with our Smartbox account if you've created one. Doesn't matter, you can always create that later, so it's not essential to do that now. You can skip this step, which is what we're going to do. But that Smartbox account is a good idea in the long run because it allows you to back up your user online in the cloud and use that on other devices or share with others. We get to our grid sets now, and you can choose whether you have symbol or text, some interactive games, the accessible apps, computer control and environmental control grids. You can choose whether they're on or off. And if you want to, you could just start with a blank page, home page, and add what you want specifically. So I'm going to go with that selection and choose next. Here we've got some privacy options that you can chat about with the user and decide whether you want them. The option to learn predictions as you go is a good idea generally to help with efficiency. Recording the chat history is also a nice efficient method. If the person says something, they can go back to their chat history to be able to say that over and over again rather than writing it each time. But they could also add that to their phrases. There's also an option for using your location so that as you move around in different locations, it will predict based on where you are, which is a nice option as well. So let's create our user, and we're going to switch to MND TAS and open that up. So now we can see we've got those text page sets that we looked at earlier. There's also a large version of Fast Talker. And then we've got a little folder with all of the accessible apps, as well as our computer control options. If we want to, we can add additional grids or get rid of some of the ones that are here to make things a bit simpler. And we can do that by going into the menu and choose Add Grid Sets. This is where you can add from what's available within Grid 3. We could go into Symbol, choose Next, and perhaps if a person needs some symbol support and isn't purely a text user or not really a great literate with writing and spelling, then you might use some of the grid sets that have symbol supports. Voco Chat, for example. You select it, choose Next, and then select it and choose to add that option to your grid set. I'm not going to do that, but you can certainly explore those grid set options by looking at the Smartbox website to gain a bit more further information. Or if you're with an individual, you can add them and just have a look at them and see if there's something that might be useful for you. The other option is there are online grids where you can explore all the grids that people across the world have uploaded. There might be some adaptations of some of the existing grids or things that they've created from scratch. The other thing that we can do is arrange what's here so that it's a little bit easier to use. So I can click in the menu and choose Arrange Grid Sets. Once I do that, you can see a little cross appears, and I can click the cross to delete that option. That's not permanent. I can always add that again. It just means that if I'm not using that particularly, I can just take it off my Grid Explorer home screen. You can also move things around if you want to by tapping on them and clicking and dragging them around the place. When I'm finished, I can click on the menu and choose Finished Arranging. I've also mentioned that the home page or screen that we land on in Grid 3 that shows all of our grids is called Grid Explorer. Various softwares have different names, but Smartbox calls it the Grid Explorer homepage. So that's where you can access all of your different grids. The other thing that we can do is have a look at the different settings that are available within Grid 3 around preferences that the user might have around their voice, pronunciations, what the access method is, and how the software launches, etc. So let's take a look at some of the settings options. To access the settings, go to the menu and then choose Settings down the bottom of the menu there. Here we have a whole range of things that we can change. So at the top is our user, and there's your user profile and things around the user itself. We can go into the access option, and here is where you change things regarding the person's access. So whether they're using touch screen or a head pointer, a mouse, settings for eye gaze, switches, touch, and voice. There's more detail on these access methods and the different things that you might change in each of the modules that relate to those access methods. In speech, this is where you assign the speaking voice, which we've already looked at, but you can also assign a voice for auditory feedback if the person's having a different auditory voice for switch scanning, or perhaps some feedback as they're touching the different cells or looking at different cells. You've also got options for as you're typing what is spoken, whether it's the sentences, words, or the individual characters. And this is where you can change things for pronunciation. So for people's names or places that might be pronounced incorrectly, particularly in Australia, there's lots of things that might be pronounced the wrong way. You can go in and change those so that they sound correct when they're spoken. Other things that you might want to change might be around writing features, the symbols, and then the accounts that you're signed into, email and Smartbox, etc. You can go in and add in information around contacts, so phone numbers and web addresses, etc., so that if you are using those functions in FastTalker GridSet, you have all of that information in there. And then there's some information around connecting a phone, and that will depend on the device that you're using, and some computer functions, which we'll talk about in a moment in terms of some tips and tricks. And here is where you can also add in some accessories around environmental control. So lots of different settings in there, but it will depend largely on your device and also what the user might need. Let's take a look at how you might back up and restore a user. This is particularly useful if you want to make sure that all the customizations and changes that you have made to a grid are saved, and you can save them to the cloud through your Smartbox account, or you might save them onto a device like a USB or hard drive. So to do that, what you will do is within Grid 3, you'll go into your menu and choose Settings and go to your user profile, and here is a button for backing up the user. Once you click on that, it's going to open up the computer hard drive and show you where you might be able to save your user. So you could do that onto a USB stick or somewhere on the computer, or somewhere on the cloud if you've got access to Dropbox or OneDrive or other cloud storage options. You'd type in the name of the user and perhaps the date that you were saving it. So you can always go back and see what your most recent save is. Once you've made those saves, if you ever want to transfer that to another computer or share it with someone, the way that you need to restore that is go into your menu on the device that you want to restore it to, choose Users, and choose Restore Backup. And then you would just need to locate where it is and restore that particular backup to look at. Now let's take a look at some quick tips and tricks, some things that can really help you when you're using Grid 3 with someone. You can chat about whether someone wants these, but one of the great options is to launch Grid 3 when you start up the device with Windows. So it saves support workers or carers or other people having to launch the device, then find the Grid 3 icon and double click on it to launch it. So the way that we would do that is go into your Grid 3 menu, go into Settings, choose Computer, and here you can see there's a little toggle option for turning off or on the option to launch Grid 3 with Windows. So as soon as you select that to on and click on OK, close Grid 3. When you launch your device again, it should launch Grid 3 as it starts up. Do be aware that this can take a little bit of time, probably around 30 to 40 seconds. So give it time before you see the Grid 3 pop up. Another tip is that you might want to use a particular grid when you launch Grid 3 so that it doesn't open up to the Grid Explorer homepage, but opens up to a specific grid. And you can do that by going into the profile of your user, and where it says Startup, it usually will default to starting in Grid Explorer, but you can click on the drop down and then any of your grids that you have on Grid Explorer, you can open up into straight away. So that could be AlphaCore. If that person just pretty much always uses text to speech, then that might be a really useful thing, is just start straight up in that. And it simplifies things a lot more than having to make the choice of where you might be going. And so you can see all of the different options that we can start up and launch into straight away. Another tip is that you may want to open up your Grid 3 and not have access to the menu that's at the top. This is maybe helpful for someone who's using touch access and they might accidentally be touching the menu and getting into the menus, changing things. So to have full screen mode, the way that you can turn that on is via the computer tab and just change it so that it doesn't show the menu bar. I would have a little bit of a play around with that because you do need a way to get out of it and get into menus. So do be aware of how to do that. There's one option for pressing F12, so you do need an option to access a keyboard. And not all devices will have that readily accessible. Or you can see that you can touch the corners of the screen. So check that you know how to do that and can make that work. It might not be an option that you need, but there it is there and you can put it into full screen mode. The last thing is for some individuals, they may need a way to access the Grid Explorer screen, and their particular grid that they're in doesn't always have an easy way to do that. For carers and support workers and people around the individual, they can easily do that by clicking on the menu bar. And so if we're in, say, Fast Talker, click on the menu bar and then choose Grid Explorer to get back. But that menu bar isn't accessible if someone is using eye gaze or switch. So the way that you can do that is, let's just choose a different grid, or I'll show you. I'll add one. Add grid set, add text, next. And I'm going to add the simple text option, simple keyboard, because I know that when we go into this option that it doesn't have an easy way to get back to Grid Explorer. So if someone was wanting to go back and change to another grid, we would need to add an easy access button for them so they can do that independently. And the way that we would do that is hit the menu button, and that looks different now that we're in a grid, and we can hit Edit Grid. Choose, there's two available buttons here that we could program with an easy accessible link. Sometimes you might find you're in a grid that doesn't have a button, and so you're going to need to work out what you can replace, or you can move and make things a little bit smaller. So I can make my chat area smaller, and then I've got more buttons available. So do not need to have a think about that. I'm going to click on this cell here, click Create, and add from, there's lots of different commands, the Grid 3 settings. Choose Next and choose the Grid Explorer button. Click OK. So now that I've got that there, we can see that's been added. It's got all the programming behind it. So I click on Finish Editing, yes to save the changes. And now my user can use their eye gaze or a switch to click on the Grid Explorer button and go back to Grid Explorer. So they're just a few tips and tricks. You'll certainly find along the way that there might be other things that the user might want to be able to do. And I'd suggest just getting in touch with tech support or looking at the Smartbox website to find out some of those extra things that you might want to do for an individual. Another thing that might come up for troubleshooting is software updates. If anything's glitchy or not working, that's usually the thing to do first, is do some updates. You can contact tech support to get some help with that. But the three main types of updates are Grid 3 software itself. And if you've got it turned on, you can see there's a little orange button that will pop up and show you when updates are available. That is available to turn on in the settings, under the computer settings. The other updates that might be needed are Windows updates and Tobii Dynavox updates, but that will depend on the device that you're using. For other support, there's a range of resources, webinars and how-to guides that you can access on YouTube and the Smartbox Hub. And there's also a 60-day trial version of Grid 3 that you can download to a Windows device to try out and use yourself. So I'd suggest, having a look at some of these links, and there's definitely some further information that you can gain from looking at those resources. For any further information, it's always going to be a good idea to refer back to the Independent Living Centre where the equipment library is managed. Loans are free for people with MND and Kennedy's disease that don't have NDIS funding. Maintenance and repairs are going to be completed through the Independent Living Centre Tasmania, and you can also access loan forms and find out about the processes on the website. There are also some fees for people who do have access to NDIS funding. That's also listed on the website as well. If there's anything that comes up in terms of equipment that you want to access that isn't available in the library, then please do make sure that you get in touch with the library or contact MND Tas to make a request, and they can look into options for adding that to the library. For any repairs and maintenance that might be managed through ILC Tas, but for technical support, at no cost you can contact Link Assistive, because that is a part of the arrangement with the equipment library, is that there is free technical support available to you. So you can contact Link Assistive on their phone number or through their website or email. You can access that information on the overview module. So thanks for listening to this webinar module on the Grid 3 software. Hopefully you've enjoyed that, but get in touch if you have any questions.